an extraordinary honor to be here, and I just want to thank the San Francisco Freedom Forum and all its supporters for this opportunity. For the past 6 years, I've been working at the intersection of art and activism, producing large-scale installations that engage thousands of people to act on behalf of a social cause. And in doing this work, it's become so clear to me that art is an incredibly powerful tool with which to engage a community and to connect people with issues in both personal and profound ways. The current project that my team and I are working on is called 1 Million Bones. My background is in art and photography, and as a visual learner, I'm constantly constructing images in my mind of the information I consume. And many times, those images have stayed with me and moved me to do something with that information. The vision for 1 million bones to be laid on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. came out of reading Philip Gorovich's book on the Rwandan genocide. We wish to inform you that tomorrow we will be killed with our families. It was one of the most gut-wrenching, haunting books I've ever read. And it was reading his descriptions of what happened in Rwanda, all the while knowing there was a genocide happening in Sudan and a conflict that had been going on in Congo for years, that made me want to bring the images I had made of his words into my part of the world, to make it real for me and for others living in the US. 1 Million Bones is a social arts practice. That means we use education, hands-on art making, and produce public installations, and we do that to raise awareness about genocide and conflicts happening in Sudan, Congo, Burma, and Somalia. Our vision is to collect 1 million handmade bones from people all over the world and install them on the National Mall in front of the Capitol in June of next year as a visible petition and symbolic mass grave. By combining art and education, we've been able to introduce this really difficult topic. And this approach allows for people of all ages to learn more without having them turn away paralyzed from information they feel both disconnected to and overwhelmed by. The action of creating a bone is really important and becomes the first critical step of bringing an activist into this movement. There's a quote that I'm constantly reminded of by Edmund Burke. All it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. We never cease to be amazed at how many adults and college students don't know what genocide is, let alone that it happens today, or how we as consumers, investors, and voters directly contribute to these conflicts. Our curriculum has allowed thousands of students to learn about these issues, but maybe more importantly, to find a voice within them. And last year, we partnered with a group called Students Rebuild so that every single bone generates a dollar donation toward CARE International's work in Somalia and Congo, up to $500,000. It's a powerful experience to create a bone and to consider the depth of that symbol. I've made hundreds of bones in this work. But the one that's most meaningful is this one that I made with a woman named Ashta in mind. She's my exact age and lives in Chad with her family. And when I made this pelvis, and in fact, every time I look at it, I'm reminded of so many things. I think about life and birth and beauty and the fragility of all of them. And I also think about death and the very thin line between the two. I think of the 4 children who Ashta lost on her journey from Sudan into Chad and in the refugee camp where she lives. I think of her 5 other children who are still alive and how her pelvis holds all of that. These bones were meant to carry those stories, to attest the gravity of these crises on individual lives. But they are most significant as a symbol of our human connection and a reminder that we belong to each other, which is such an important message because when we accept the idea that we belong to each other, we recognize our responsibility to one another. And that's what I regard most in this work we do. Experiencing art's capacity to bring issues, no matter how close or far away they are from us, home. And whether home is a place, a family, a freedom, or an idea, it's what we value more than anything else. And it's what we value that we'll fight to protect. Last year, we produced 2 50,000 bone preview installations in both Albuquerque, New Mexico, and New Orleans, Louisiana. And this is a video from our Albuquerque event.
1996, that's when I lost my father. And then in 1998, I lost my brother and my 2 nephews. And then my friends, our neighbors, pastors, you know, all those. I knew all those people who got killed that same night.
The bones that are inside of us, the living bones, the pieces of our body, and how we're not so different. We're all similar.
The feeling that I have is not about revenge. It's not about that. So if we have to think of revenge, then this is not a solution. All we need is forgiveness and thinking of the future. Like, what do we need as a Congolese so our kids, our younger brother, our brothers, the new generation will not go through what we've been through. I mean, you really don't do something until you know something. Then that's what 1 Million Bones is doing, to let people know what is going on in Congo, in Sudan, in Burma, in the other countries. Keep talking about it, like the messages, if the message can keep going, so people can do something about it.
One of the most significant moments for me working on this project came from an exchange I had that day with one of our presenters, Kigabo Mbatimatima. He's a refugee from Congo and a survivor of the Gatumba massacre in Burundi. And an hour after we had started laying the bones down, he was ahead of me on the road, and he turned around and he told me he had to go back to his room. And so I offered to drive him, and he said, "No, that's okay, I'm going to walk." And so I offered to walk with him, and again, he said no. He said, "I have to go back to my room. I have to be by myself and cry for a little while. It's just so hard." And it was a really awkward moment because, you know, we had been collecting these bones for so long, but we had never laid them out, and we didn't know how people would respond, particularly the people this vision was meant to serve. And so I first apologized because I would never want to make it harder. And I asked him if there was anything about it that he thought was wrong or offensive in any way. And he firmly looked at me and he said, "No, that's not it. But you have to understand, we lost so many people, and we never saw what happened to those people. And in your mind, you want to believe that they were okay, that something else happened. But I saw them today, and it's just so hard. But we have to face it. Everyone has to face it." That same month, we laid those bones in Albuquerque. 3 new mass graves were found in Sudan. A year later, this past August, hundreds of armed men swept into the Kasab displaced persons camp in North Darfur and started burning and raping and shooting. In just a couple hours, several people were killed and tens of thousands were sent running for their lives. UN officials and aid workers said it was among the most troublesome violence they had seen in that region in years. But maybe the saddest thing is that after all of these years of conflict, a new generation of lost boys and lost girls is emerging. Thousands of unaccompanied children are streaming out of the Nuba Mountains, fleeing a relentless aerial assault and the prospect of a famine. A recent report released by Oxfam indicates that the camps that are sheltering nearly 100,000 Sudanese in South Sudan's Maban County are ticking time bombs on the brink of a major outbreak for disease. This is why we make bones. Because never again has been happening again. This project is about process. The process of connecting your heart to a symbol, of connecting your heart to people in your community, of connecting your heart to people living far away. And it's also the process of connecting to an issue, seeing what these connections look like and how people talk about them. This past April 27th, for our Road to Washington campaign, 35 installations were laid out in 35 state capitals that were all volunteer organized and created. And our group in Tallahassee laid 7,000 bones that day. And at the event, Mukweso Menene, who is a refugee from Congo, was asked if he thought this project mattered. And his response truly surprised all of us. It astonished us, really. He said he thought it was one of the most important things that we could do. He said that in his country, all of the skeletons are in the closet, that the rulers and former rulers bear responsibility for these terrible crimes, but that nobody ever sees the evidence of these crimes. It's hidden from the world. But when you make these bones and you put them in public, people can see the evidence of these crimes for the first time. And that awareness is the first step for change to be possible. Last year, I went to New Orleans to work on this project. And what I learned is that New Orleans is one of the most violent cities in our country. So when we brought this project into classrooms and community centers, a lot of the discussions drew from the students' personal experience. And these were incredibly honest and personal discussions. And as the students learned about the violence happening on the scale it is in places like Sudan and Congo, they felt a deep connection and an empathy. They crafted their bones from their own stories and to honor the stories of those living far away. And I was blown away by how many showed up on a Saturday when we laid 50,000 down. New Orleans was the major port in the US for the African slave trade. And at the time, enslaved Africans living in the city would get 1 day a week to themselves. And most of them would come to Congo Square, where they would drum and dance. And the story is that you could hear that sound reverberate throughout the entire city. So when we laid the bones in Congo Square, it was the sound of drumming. The leader of the drum circle, Baba Luther, has been working with his partner, Jamilia, for 30 years to keep this sacred space recognized and cradled. We asked Jamilia to lay the first bone that day. It took her 3 attempts, as that short journey to carry the bone brought her back both to the history of her ancestors, which she's fought so hard to keep present in her community's mind, and to the deep connection she felt to whom she considers her brothers and sisters living far away in conflict. Baba Luther said in all his years, 30 years working in that space, he had never seen anything so powerful, and that he'd be bringing these drums to DC next year. This is part of the challenge of working at the intersection of art and activism, though, because neither field will embrace what we do entirely, and yet both fields are striving to elicit this kind of deep down in your gut response, because it's that kind of response you can turn into sustained action and activism. I'm not advocating that art is the solution to all of our issues, but I do recognize that a lot of our movements need more activists and that we need as many things as possible to inspire a generation and to reawaken and stir an older one. And that's something I've seen an artistic vision do, inspire people to imagine and dream that a different reality is possible, which is what we call hope, the most important thing in this room, because without it, there'd be no reason for any of us to be here. Thank you.